So something I'm grateful for is that I lived through the age of OutKast. OutKast is a legendary hip-hop duo. They've given us so much era-defining music, and we're going to celebrate them for it. Today on the podcast, it's the anniversary of their biggest album. We're going to revisit the legacy of OutKast. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Listen, to give you an idea of how much OutKast has dominated my life personally, let me give you some context. There is not one room where I could walk in and play this song and have it be a bad choice.
My baby don't mess around because she loves me so, and this I know for sure. But does she really wanna, but can't stand to see me walk out the door?
Well, good morning. We're awake now. That is a bit of Hey Ya from the iconic rap duo and the pride of Atlanta, OutKast. It is off their Grammy-winning double album, Speakerboxxx, The Love Below. It's one of many, many acclaimed albums from OutKast. This is what has made them one of the most influential rap acts of our time. This year marks the 20th anniversary of that record. But also, we should say, last Friday, Andre 3000 from OutKast surprised his fans with his very first solo album. Imagine you've been waiting for years for a solo album from one of your favorite hip-hop duos, and then you get it, and then it's not exactly what you expected. I want you to have a listen to some of the album, and then what you're going to hear is the reaction from the Daily Show correspondent Jordan Klepper and the guest host, the comedian Leslie Jones.
Oh, you know what? This is a beautiful, fascinating experiment in the sonic...
No, it is not! I gotta say something, Jordan. This man is one of the greatest rappers of all time.
Okay.
We have been waiting 17 years for this mother to release a new album.
Okay.
And it's all fluke. I'm gonna kill somebody.
Okay.
I hate to say that I'm with her, but I'm a little bit with her. Comedian Leslie Jones expressing what a lot of us are feeling about 3000, about 3 Stacks embracing the flute on his new record. I spoke to Regina Bradley and David Dennis Jr. about this and OutKast's larger pop legacy, but we started off by talking about 3 Stacks and all those flutes. Here's what Regina had to say.
I laughed because the running joke for like, I guess we could say decades now has been like, we're not going to get an Andre rap album. You know what I'm saying? Yes. So, I mean, I'm not mad at it. I listened to it this morning. I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at it at all. I mean, like, you know, it was a sound bath. It was a sound bath.
That's a good way to describe it. It's something that you're sort of supposed to immerse yourself in. I don't know if you noticed, but the opening song reads kind of like an apology from Andre 3000 to all the rap fans. It is called, and here's the title, I swear I really wanted to make a rap album, but this is literally the way the wind blew me this time. I think given that title, it feels appropriate to just listen to some of it right now. I gotta say, you spend weeks preparing an excitement for an OutKast panel, and then the day arrives, and we gotta lead it with a flute song. But that's Andre 3000 still influencing us in the way that we do things. This is a song called I Swear I Really Wanted to Make a Rap Album, but this is literally the way the wind blew me this time. David, you've written a lot about OutKast over the decades. How are you feeling about what you just heard on this debut solo record from 3 Stacks?
Well, I just want to say, first of all, there's a lot of rappers who do rap who should have a no bars disclaimer on their album cover.
That's a bar. That's a bar right there. Let's go.
Obviously, a lot of people want Andre 3000 to make a certain type of music. I tried to put this on the gym this morning. The vibes were not there. This is not something for the gym.
No.
Yeah. So, but when I left the gym, I was playing in the car and all that stuff. I mean, it's delightful. It is a delightful album. It seems, you know, I'm not a traditionally trained critic of flute music, so I can't like rate it on the scale of great flute albums. But I will say that, you know, if you love OutKast, right? If you come up loving OutKast for all of these years. I think that like the people who truly, truly love this group and who truly, truly love Andre 3000 are happy that he's doing something that makes him happy.
You could have gave it a 5 flute rating.
Right.
You ain't got Mike. How many flutes does it get?
Let's give it 3.5 flutes and 1 wind chime.
Okay, we are going to come back to this album. We're going to come back to what it means for maybe future releases from 3 Stacks, but also just from OutKast in general. But we're actually here, I should remind the people, that we're here to look back at the legacy of OutKast and everything they've already given us. Regina, I'll start with you on this one. You're a Southern girl. You're an academic who's dedicated so much of your work and your writing to thinking about OutKast. What was the first OutKast song that caught your attention?
In Due Time from the Soul Food soundtrack.
Check it. When that nigga the cruising and the race capping to the side, thinking the police gonna pull me over with this herb off in my ride. So
I mean, like, I wasn't part of the streets. My folks wasn't about that life for me, but it was listening to them talk about these current event issues and listening to, like, you got to keep going, you got to keep grinding, and then to have CeeLo and his Deacon squall that he has that is like absolutely perfect.
Yes.
I was like, yeah, this is my jam. This is my joint. To this day, In Due Time is still my favorite OutKast song of all time.
Mm-hmm. David, what was it for you?
My first exposure to OutKast was Elevators.
Ooh.
I remember Andre's verse, right? The third verse. Got stopped at the mall the other day.
Got stopped at the mall the other day. Heard a call from the other way that I just came from. Some was saying something, talking about smoke something. You remember me from school? No, not really, but he kept smiling like a clown, facial expression looking silly, and he kept asking me, what kind of car you drive? I know you paid.
I had a blank tape, and I was waiting for that song to come on the radio so I could record it and remember that third verse. Still not quite sure who they were, but I do recall shortly thereafter going into a Camelot CDs and tapes, and there was a rap out like these two brothers on the cover that looked like a comic book, and I was like, I gotta get this thing. And so that is where I got ATLians, and I realized that Elevators was on ATL. Like, this is the same people that rapped this song. It just felt like the universe was telling me to get exposed to this album, that's really where I became an OutKast fanatic.
I'm going to go back for a moment, okay? I'm going to go back for a moment to remind people that we now think of OutKast as this like giant, iconic thing, but it took a minute. It took a minute for OutKast to really start buzzing in the rap world. But an early moment that people still talk about is the moment that happened in the 1995 Source Awards in New York City. That ceremony it basically played a huge role in sparking what the media now calls the East Coast, West Coast beef. But during that ceremony, who wins Best New Artist but OutKast? And as they're walking up to the stage, they are booed. They are booed. And then take a listen to what Andre does with those boos as he delivers the acceptance speech.
Yeah, first of all, you know what I'm saying? We want to thank God, just, you know what I'm saying, dead serious, because if it weren't for him, you know what I'm saying, we wouldn't be here. But it's like this, though. I'm tired of folks, you know what I'm saying? Them closed-minded folks, you know what I'm saying? It's like we got a demo tape and don't nobody want to hear, but it's like this, the South got something to say. That's all I got to say. Yeah.
The South got something to say. Regina, thinking back to that moment now, what comes to mind?
Hey, I'm about to go take a lunch break. Regina wrote whole chapters and books about this. I ain't got nothing to say. I'm gone. I cannot contribute to this at all. I'm about to go get some lunch or something.
Regina, try to condense the giant scholarship of the body of scholarship that you've done on the South got something to say, if you can. What comes to mind?
I mean, like, just the defiance, man. It's such a Southern moment. Like, it's giving you, hip hop respectability. Like, I like to thank God first. It's showing home training. We appreciate it. But like the way that it flips to is like this though. Like it completely changes the whole it completely changes the whole vibe. And it's almost like you gotta sit up in your chair a little bit, like, what's he about to say? So, I think that it's still the rallying cry. Like there's no other way to get around it, right? And I just think it's so. The one thing I will say, I won't quote the book at length, so David can't go to Waffle House while I'm doing this. So
the book is called Chronicles of Stankonia. Just make sure everybody knows that. We just go say it as many times as we possibly can.
I was gonna plug the book, but I'm glad that you're doing it. But anyway, yes, you continue, Regina.
Thank you, cousin.
Gotcha.
But just real quick, I think it's so significant because he didn't say OutKast has something to say. He didn't say that 3000 got something to say, or Dre at the time had something to say. He didn't say Georgia. He said the South. So there's this recognition that something is bubbling to the surface within hip hop culture, even though mainstream hip hop or Northeast hip hop didn't want to acknowledge that. And that worked in our favor in so many different ways. It's like, you're not expecting us to come, you don't see us coming. So if you don't see us coming, you're not going to expect Cash Money taking over for the 99 and the 2000. You're not going to expect Trap. You're not going to expect Crunk. You're not going to expect UGK. You're not going to expect, Chopped and Screwed.
Yes.
So there was an awareness that Southernness was much more complicated and much more expansive than what Andre knew about, as well as what the audience knew about. And for him to call it out and call us to the front and center, Southern folks was a huge moment, not even just in hip hop history, but just in Southern history in general.
Regina, what do you think was preventing rap fans and the rap industry in general from embracing OutKast and also just like the South in general at that moment?
This is not even just hip hop. This is just in general. The South is supposed to be backwards and traumatized and enslaved, and all we do is thinking about plantation lullabies and songs and all of these. And I'm just like, no, we're more complicated than that. And when folks realize that Southern Black folks are complicated, we have multiple threads going on in our life. They're like, oh, it's something different. Like, I think that, that's one of the reasons that OutKast called themselves OutKast, right? And the second album was called ATLians. There's this expectation that we are ostracized, that we are removed from the mainstream. So if we're removed from the mainstream, that means that we're removed from the rules. Like the rules dictate y'all. They don't dictate us because we're not even part of that conversation to begin with. So if I'm not in the conversation, I'm going to do what I want. And that's ultimately what OutKast did. Like, I'm gonna do what I want.
That's exactly right. When we look back at the popular rapping duos in hip hop history, Salt and Peppa, EPMD and UGK, Mobb Deep, Black Star, more recently City Girls, there's this dynamic between one member and the other. There's this yin yang thing between a lot of these acts. David, what do you think Big Boy brings out of Andre, and what do you think Andre brings out of Big Boy?
Like, we don't credit Big Boy enough as somebody who brings a lot of the maturity to OutKast. Like, he always brought this level of maturity to OutKast, which is something we sort of think about of Andre doing. But like, when you go back to Aquemini, so much of that commentary about 3 strikes and you're out, prison industrial complex, parenting, about like, the adult stuff. A lot of that comes from Big Boy. Even when you go to Red Velvet, or you talk about the Aquemini song itself, Pay Your Beeper Bill, all that stuff that they're talking about. Like, Big Boy brought this maturity and and he grounded it in this very approachable way that I think, takes OutKast to this level of like this commentary that's it grounds Andre a little bit. Like, he is sort of like in the abstract in some sort of ways. And Big Boy grounds it in this very real world maturity, this very real world adulthood, which is wild because they were 23 years old when Aquemini came out. Like, this is crazy to me. And go back to listen to Aquemini, and I actually find myself resonating a little bit more with what Big Boy is saying, because he's talking about this life that I have actually lived.
Right. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. After Andre 3000 just dropped a new album, we thought this is a perfect time to look back at OutKast's legacy. Today on the podcast, we got 2 people who've written a lot about OutKast: Regina Bradley, David Dennis Jr. David, another part of what made OutKast so noteworthy was the beats, right? They stood in stark contrast to the popular rap sounds at the time, coming out of the East Coast, coming out of the West Coast. What do you think made OutKast sound so unique?
Man, that's a huge question. It was just like, obviously there's a live instrumentation, right? Yes. There's experimentation here. There is, which again goes back to Regina saying, is this idea of like, even though all of this instrumentation music is born in the South, this idea that we were not as complex enough to pull something like this together, right? But at the same time, it's just grimy and dirty and like just funky in this way that's like so raw. Like raw is the word, you know. So it was like this blending of this quote unquote high level live instrumentation with this traditional sort of trunk rattling sound. Like that elevators beat, it sounds like it was made in a dungeon. You know what I'm saying? Like it just sounds like dungeon music. And like what they did and the way that it elevated and changed throughout the years, like the same people who make elevators make Hey Ya. You know what I'm saying? Like this is
yes,
like wild to me that this exists. And these same people make, you know, waterfalls and all these crossover hits are making these same type of beats as Aquemini, right? And like that is sort of what they bring, this sort of diversity, this rawness. Man, it's just funky, man. Like it's just yeah. I don't know what else to say about it.
I mean, you said a lot, but also like Regina, like there's something to be said about the fact that like the thing that you just said. Okay, if you already see me as outside the system, then I'm free to do what I want. Like there's this idea, right, that it was actually more expensive for them to go out and get beats, you know, and sample already existing songs than just hiring session musicians and having them play in the studio because they are kind of already outside the system, right?
I mean, yeah, but you know, to go real quick back to what David was saying about organized noise, there would be no Atlanta sound without organized noise. Like they're on the Mount Rushmore, period. It doesn't matter whose Mount Rushmore they're on. Yes. They on there, right? And I think the reason for that is because they paid homage to those sonic and musical roots that they grew up listening to, funk music, listening to gospel, listening to the blues. All of these different influences helped them to think about what can we do to make a signature sound that makes us stand out from everybody else. But you know, yeah, sampling is expensive, and I really want to shout out Joe Schloss here because he wrote this book about sampling ethics, right? And there's like a checklist that's like there's certain things that you have to do to make sure that the sample is legit within the culture, right? Like you're not supposed to sample somebody else's stuff. You're supposed to like find your own sample that's like obscure enough that you can make something, you know, new with it, right? So it was like all of these things were happening, and I remember going to an interview, like a panel with them, an interview panel with Organized Noise. And I remember them saying they would go to New York and go to the record stores there, right? And like pick out the things that other folks wouldn't and see what they could do with it. So ultimately, I think that, you know, what's fascinating is that they would probably have a sample, but it didn't sound like a sample. Unlike today's music where, you know, there are producers who will literally just give you the B-side instrumental and press play and folks will record over it. There's nothing that makes it innovative or new. And that was like a huge no-no, especially if you're trying to put yourself on. So if I'm trying to put myself on, then that means I need to come correct within all aspects of whatever it is that I'm trying to deliver. And Organized Noise gave us the blueprint for what that looks like.
I want to come back to the present. I want to come back to 3 Stacks and the debut solo album. Big Boy has given us 3 solo rap albums to date since Speakerboxxx Love Below. Andre still at 0. Regina, what do we know about why Andre has been so hesitant to give us a solo rap album?
I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that Andre gets on a lot of OutKast fans' nerves is he's so honest and straightforward with it. In 2014, he said that the reason that he didn't want to do the reunion tour was because he felt like he outgrew it. He's like, this is like nostalgia. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of the reasons that he started getting the jumpsuits because he felt like he was selling out. And then, you know, recently, this week he was talking about how he's 48 years old and he's like, what am I going to rap about? Like I do grown people stuff. You know what I'm saying?
He gave the example of a colonoscopy. Like, I'm not going to rap about a colonoscopy. It is worth noting throughout all of this that it's not like Andre's not rapping at all. He's actually rapped on quite a few albums from other artists over the past decade or so, including a song with Killer Mike that is currently being nominated for Rap Song of the Year at the 2024 Grammys. So it's not like he's not rapping. He's just not rapping in a way where he wants to piece it together into an album. David, it's been 20 years since OutKast gave us their last album. And since then, you know, Atlanta, the hip-hop South, they've become the dominant place in rap. We've talked about this. How are you feeling about the strength of OutKast's legacy in 2023?
I mean, OutKast's legacy is unimpeachable, man. Like, there's just like, I think that there are few artists there that you could just say, like, I've always said that, like, sometimes we put hip hop in this space where it's confined to just comparing them to other hip hop artists and who's the greatest hip hop artist of all time. But if we're talking about the Stevie Wonders and the Princes and all these folks, like I would put OutKast right there in terms of like the greatness of music as a whole. And so, I do not like the language of them transcending hip hop, because you can't transcend something that is as beautiful and artistic as hip hop. Yes. But they are just unimpeachable in that way that they are a pillar for which all this Southern stuff, they built on other folks built on them, but you cannot talk about hip hop in the South, or actually Southern culture as a whole. Regina and I are two writers. We ain't rapping, but you can't tell me that OutKast has not influenced us in the way that we go about everything that we do in very meaningful ways. And you can talk about, the best writers, best poets, best musicians, and best food come out the South, right? And best movement folk come out the South. And if you're of a certain age, OutKast influenced you in all of those parts of life. And so that makes them sort of unimpeachable.
Regina, I'm going to give you the last word in a minute, but I just want to say, I was talking to one of my cousins about Yachty, about Lil Yachty, specifically about the song Poland by Yachty, because it's like this strange little beautiful haunting cry. I don't know what he's talking about in that song. He took a walk to Poland, love that song, and he was like, man, I've never heard anything like this before. I'm like, what if I introduce you to some OutKast songs? I would like to introduce you to how we got here, and I guess when I talk about the legacy, one of my questions is, do the young people walk by the OutKast statue and salute, or do they go, no, I don't want to talk about this old music, old head? Like, how do we think about that legacy in 2023? How are you thinking about it?
I know they better not pass me and be like, I don't want to listen to this old folk. Like my daughter. Yeah. I remember a couple years ago, the NBA draft, they were asking some of the new rookies, the drafted folks, have you heard of OutKast? And they were like, who was OutKast? And my daughter immediately texted me and was like, Mom, I'm not one of those people who don't know OutKast. I know OutKast. I was like, you better. You're not going to embarrass me in these streets. I'm going to be an OutKast scholar and my daughter don't know who OutKast is. But I think, I have to agree with David. I think that their legacy is impeachable, but I think that they could have a renaissance, if you will, because of TikTok. I mean, like TikTok is like this site of discovery for younger generations, right? So if they're, just becoming interested in a CeeLo, right? Like bring back rapping CeeLo. I need a shirt. Then I can definitely see them, going down that Dungeon family hole, because there's so much good music. Like we talk about OutKast and Goody Mob all the time, but we don't talk about Witch Doctor. We don't talk about Cool Breeze. You know what I'm saying? And I'll be like, East Point's greatest hit is a classic. Like you just put it in and ride, which is the requirement, I think, to be in the Dungeon family. For real. So I think the legacy is evolving in the same way. And then the last thing, that I got to say about it is, if we go back to what Andre said, the South got something to say. I don't think it's about the artists anymore. I think now it's at the point where we need to document and show younger generations, like there was this moment in time where you had like these multiple big bang moments in music. And a lot of those big bangs were coming out of the South at this particular time. So, I guess if social media is not going anywhere, use social media as a teaching tool and chop it up in ways that folks will be, more readily willing to understand why OutKast is the greatest group of all time.
Ooh, the greatest group of all time. I mean, listen.
I said what I said. I don't care.
And I should have been prepared for it because I knew who was asking. I knew exactly who I was asking. Regina Bradley, David Dennis Jr., thank you so much for your time, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
My conversation with Regina Bradley. She wrote Chronicling Stankonia, The Rise of the Hip Hop South, and David Dennis Jr., a music journalist and culture critic. Andre 3000's latest album, New Blue Sun, is out now. That is it for the podcast today. Listen, before I go, though, I want to give a shout out to the winner of our Britney Spears memoir giveaway. Her name is Ashley Milbury. She's in Montreal. Congratulations, Ashley. We hope you enjoy the copy of The Woman in Me. And hey, if you want more giveaways, get on our Instagram. It is at Commotion CBC. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. Hey, I've enjoyed being here with you. I'm going to see you tomorrow.